Brooklyn Pony Part 20. Obviously, if it's number 20, there's 19 other videos in the series, and for the most part, the video series has been building or rebuilding a '66 Mustang convertible that was rusted to pieces. So go back and look at those other videos, and maybe you can learn something from all that. But basically, I'm using Dynacorn parts and assembling this car from Dynacorn and pieces left over from the original car. So as I move along, I want to do some different things in this video series. I know it's kind of hard to focus on one direction, and so what I'm going to work on in this one is trying to mount up this Griffin radiator that was ordered by the owner, and also the condenser unit that is for the vintage air kit. I'll show you some of the details that are going to be involved, but it's a little bit more complicated than just bolting in this radiator assembly. I'll also show you the radiator and the condenser unit. And the reason I'm doing this now, I don't have the engine in place or any of that stuff, but I want to make sure I have enough room, or if I need to modify something, I do it ahead of time rather than trying to do it later. It just makes more sense in my mind. So I'll show you what's in these boxes, and obviously when you install the radiator, you have to consider the idea of installing the condenser if you're going to put in an air conditioning. So that's why I'm doing both at the same time. So let me open these up and show you what's inside these boxes. Alright, so as you can see, we have this really nice aluminum radiator with a fan shroud and fan already assembled onto it. It has different ports down here. If you're running an automatic transmission, you could use those, which we will be using those. There's a drain port, and that's about it. Over here is a controller. I believe there's a relay. I'll have to look that over. I know there's a sensor, temperature sensor, and of course all that'll be hooked up together and incorporated. So let me show you some other things that are going to be involved with the radiator. Okay, so we know that this is a new Dynacorn core support, and I just wanted to show you, this is designed for the factory original radiator. So it has an opening that is 17.5 inches by 15 1/4. It also, if you can see here, leans back slightly. And I believe the original design of that was when the tank was on top of the radiator in the original configuration, they kind of pushed the tank a little forward, and it kind of filled the space just a little bit. It wasn't perfectly centered, or I'll show you on the aluminum one how the tank is the same width as the cores. So that's a little bit of a difference. When I set the radiator in here, it also, you'll see it sits back further. Before I set that in, I want to do some measuring and just show you the difference. I said the original opening was 17.5 inches. Well, this one, the opening or area that would be normally seen is 20 inches. So there's a difference of 2.5 inches. That's not going to work for this configuration. Also, the height, I think, is probably going to be pretty close. This is 16. That one's 15 1/4. Probably not going to be able to do much with that because space is limited. So what I have to do is modify the core support. I'm going to make the opening bigger, and let me show you how it sits in there, because I'm going to do my own little redesign. So basically, and I'm just setting the tank, the bottom tank, all the way down. But what this does is, as you look at it here, you can see there's a big gap here at the front. I mean, that's probably 1.5 inches or better, and that's just not going to suit what we're doing. So I'm going to modify the core support. I'm going to change the angles and bring this radiator so it's more square to the core support. So that's one thing I'm going to have to modify. Now in doing this, I also need to look at the condenser and see how that's going to interact and make sure it's not a problem. Do not open with a sharp object. I hope I don't want to open with a dull object. You can see that's not very big, and that's okay. Also in this box are various other hard lines, some hoses, all pieces associated with this as an assembly. Now normally other kits that I've installed, they supply you with brackets. So I'm sure somewhere in one of the other boxes there will be brackets to attach this. My concern was, how will it fit the car? And so basically it's designed to fit that original width opening. So I don't think it's going to hurt with me modifying the mount point for the radiator, because all I'm doing is limiting some of that space that's behind the condenser. So that should not be a problem, and I'm going to drive on. So essentially with some simple measuring, I can tell you that the original opening, or the opening from center to center on these mount holes, is 18.5 inches. I need 21.5 center to center on the bolt holes. So I'm going to have to expand this 1.5 inches on either side. I've already measured, and basically coming from this edge and this edge and finding what would be center, I already know that the opening is actually centered on the car. I know it's confusing to look at these because of this extra space over here for the battery box that you don't have over here, but the opening is centered. So now there's a couple other things that I need to keep in mind. I'm not only going to have to make this wider, but I'm also going to have to reconfigure, like I said, the shape, because I want it to lean back a little bit. So I'm going to do some simple cuts. At least I say simple cuts. I also want to try to continue this shape out here more, just to make it more uniform. I know it's not going to be noticed, but if I can make that happen, I'm going to make that happen. So I'm going to cut below that and come out this way. I also need to, like I said before, angle this back. So there's a few things I'm going to have to do, and it's kind of hard to explain how I'm going to do it. But basically get the idea that I'm going to do this and this, and stay tuned. Maybe this will make a little more sense. Maybe. You can see where I have these lines drawn. I'm going to cut this black line in the front here. That's going to be my straight edge. I'm also going to cut that secondary line. And because this is angled, it has that angle in it, I'm going to cut that, and that'll allow this piece to come back without having to reshape this very much. By cutting that, it eliminates this corner, and this will come back, and then I'll deal with modifying this piece as I go. Now again, this is just to get this back. I still have to deal with making a side-to-side transfer. sometimes it's easier to see things after you cut things loose. So I decided to just cut that off completely. I still have that opening there. And basically, I just need to move this over 1.5 inches. So if I do that, and I've got some measurement, just roughly, to come over and line up with this little black mark here on the top, and then bring it forward. I know it's kind of hard to see with me holding the camera and everything, but basically I'm going to reshape this flange, or this, reshape this section of it, roll it back around, and then I'll be able to weld that to the part that I just cut. So I think that's going to be pretty simple at that point. Let me get that piece taken care of, and then I'll work more on this upper section. Okay, so I think I figured out where I'm going with this. I did cut off that other side because I could not move the radiator back with that piece there. It was interfering, so I just cut that off. I'll adjust that later. But on this side, as you can see, I did make some cuts up here to eliminate some material. I cut out some material here so I could bring this piece back, and of course this leg that I had cut off. And now what I've done is I've got the radiator centered. There's my center mark. I have some paint sticks. I don't know if you can see it or not, but I have paint sticks stacked up underneath the radiator so as to keep it, maybe you can see, I don't know, but stacked up some paint sticks to keep it up in its position, because the height was okay, and as you can see, this piece is sitting where it was cut off, and I've just set it back on that edge, and the holes line up at this point. So I'm happy with that. So basically, I'm going to have to tack that in place and then make these filler pieces. And that's just a wedge. So that's not, to me, it's not that big a deal, but for somebody else it may be a bit more complicated if they're not comfortable with all the welding and stuff that's going to take place. But I'm going to make that wedge and fill in that gap. And then I'll work on this other side and get it in place. Now, this was a learning side over here. I could have left that leg longer and rolled it back sooner and left some of that material, and it would have been fine. This one, you know, cutting it off, I have a lot of material that I can play with at this point. So again, I'm going to move it out, you know, 1.5 inches, and so I can adjust this leg to fit this gap better. So stay tuned. I'll show you what it looks like at that point. I just wanted to show you that I tack welded in the bottom edge here and also up here, and so that basically creates a simple foundation for attaching the other pieces. So as you can see, I still have to make, you know, some filler pieces here, and like I said before, by making that pie cut. But everything else is where it should be. Now I left a little space because there's going to be a nut clip or something that attaches to the radiator, so that'll have to allow for a little bit of space there. But even if I need to make some adjustments, I still can. But for the most part, I think that's going to work out just fine. I wanted to show you this because some people may question how, you know, you figure out how big a wedge you want to put in that opening, and it's really not that complicated. If you take a ruler, and I'm just going to measure off the top here. I know it's kind of hard to see, but that's basically, it comes out to 3/8 of an inch. And I span that over a distance, in this case of about 11.5 inches. And then I transfer those measurements onto this piece of scrap, and I will cut that on my throatless shear. And then once I get that cut, I will blend it as necessary to fit it into that gap, tack weld it in place, and once that's in, I'll start working on making the pieces up here. of course this metal bends slightly out of shape, but it can easily be straightened back out and fit into that gap. Okay, so as you can see, I have that long piece tacked in place. I'm pretty happy with how that's looking. And now I'm working on the piece that's going to go on the opposite side. And this is that same piece that I cut off, and I shortened up the leg and just kept forming it until I got the shape that I wanted. So let me show you how that looks. Hopefully I can get in here without blocking the view, but that piece will fit in just like that, and it lines up with the holes in the radiator, and I'll tack that in place. And once I have those two pieces completely tacked in, then I can go back and start working on the upper sections, because I wanted to do that on the other side over here, but I realized to do that I need to take the radiator out of the way, and I'd rather get everything fit while the radiator is in the position it needs to be. So at this point I'm pretty happy with that. I'll get that other piece tacked in and go from there. Before I get too far along, I'll just show you I made the filler piece for up here, and I still have to make the one for this side. And I started tacking it in. And once I get all that tacked, then of course I'll blend everything and make a smooth transition. And I think it's going to turn out really nice. Pretty happy with it. Okay, so the passenger side is finished. I think it looks pretty good. I blended all the welds. Still a little bit of touch up to do, but for the most part I'm happy with it. I will say, you know, people ask, what do you blend this stuff with? Well, this is a 4.5 inch sanding disc. I did that to get the bulk of the welds, and then I use various 2-inch discs on a what we call a 90 grinder, and did the rest of those. And up here in the corner, you know, you can do different things. Like I usually break the edge, but what I mean by that is I break the strength of the sanding disc down so that it'll flow into that corner a little more and become soft. And in essence, I don't know if I can show it to you or not, but basically it'll roll over that edge of the sanding disc. And that's pretty much it. Okay, I think I'm finished with all the welding that I want to do. There's still a little bit of more blending that could take place, and I may do that later. Things are looking pretty good, I think. Pretty happy with it. And I'll do one more shot. I want to show it with the radiator in place, and so stay tuned. Alright, there it is installed, or loosely installed. I only have 2 nut plates holding it in place, but I'm happy with it. It looks like it belongs in there, and everything fits nice.
If I need to adjust it, I still can move it side to side a little bit. You can see the bottom holes line up nicely. And of course I'll have to build whatever bracket system is going to be needed for the AC condenser that'll go outside of that. But this video I just wanted to show sometimes you have to modify things, and this is one way to do it. So again, I'm happy with it. There'll be a little more, of course I'll paint all this stuff later on, and as you can hear, I still have my cold going, so hopefully that goes away soon. That's the end of this video, part 20 for Brooklyn Pony. There will be more coming. Stay tuned, and if you can, give me a thumbs up, and if not, well, that's up to you. But once again, thanks for watching, and stay tuned.
What I wanted to be, I've already measured, and coming from edge and so now there's a couple other things I need to take into mind. So now there's a couple other things that I need to